Hey, first grade families, it's Mrs. O'Hare again. I'm back with another chapter of Dump the Chump. This chapter, we're getting towards the end. In fact, there's 3 chapters left. This chapter is called Delivery Day. I woke up Monday morning with a smile on my face. Delivery Day, I said right out loud. The end of Operation Dump the Chump was almost here. It wouldn't be long before Robert would be packing his bags and moving out. There were only 3 more days until school got out for the summer. To kill time, the teacher made us write a composition, which is like a story, called My Summer Plans. While everyone else was writing about their exciting, summer vacations, all I could think of was how peaceful my life was going to be without Robert the Slobber. That afternoon, I rushed home, and I got the letter I had written to the Hensons. I put it in my back pocket and told my mom that I was going out to play. Even from a few houses away, I could see Mr. and Mrs. Henson sitting on their front porch. They waved as I walked to their sidewalk, up to their sidewalk. "Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Henson," I said. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything, but my mother wanted me to give you this." I took the envelope out, and I handed it to the Hensons. Mr. Henson opened it right away and started to read. When he was done, his face was sadder than anything. "Oh my," he said. "Do you know what this letter says, Oscar?" he asked me. "Yes, my mom let me read it before I brought it over." Mrs. Henson leaned over too. "What does it say, Ed?" she asked her husband. "Read it out loud. I don't have my glasses." Mr. Henson sighed. "What's that like?" "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Henson, our wonderful son Oscar told you that he's talked to you about our family's recent problems. Please don't worry about us. As soon as we get rid of Robert, we'll be able to rent out his room and get some money coming in. If you happen to know anyone in the neighborhood who would like to have a nice little boy come in and stay with them for a while, please let us know." Mr. Henson looked at his wife. "It's signed Mr. and Mrs. Winkle." Mrs. Henson closed her eyes for a minute. "Oh no, oh no, oh dear," she said. For the next couple minutes, no one said a word. Then all of a sudden, Mrs. Henson frowned a little bit. She asked Mr. Henson to read the note one more time. When he finished, her frown got even bigger. Something about the note was definitely bothering her. "Is something wrong, Mrs. Henson?" I asked. Slowly, she shook her head. "No, nothing's wrong exactly, Oscar. It's just that your mom used the term, 'get rid of Robert.' It just sounds a little harsh. That's all. Finding a nice place for your brother to live isn't the same as getting rid of him." I felt myself start to tense. "Oh, well, you haven't been around my mom much, Mrs. Henson," I said. "She says 'get rid of' all the time. It's like a pet expression of hers, sort of. And besides, you should see how upset she was when she wrote this note. I bet she didn't even know what she was writing." Mrs. Henson thought it over. "Yes, of course. She probably was just so upset." It was definitely time for me to get out of there. I stood up and said, "I'll tell you one thing, though. It really would be great if you guys knew someone in the neighborhood who could keep Robert. You know, like maybe if you knew an older couple who needed a little extra help around the yard or something. That would be perfect, wouldn't it? I bet my parents wouldn't feel half as bad about getting rid of Robert if he was close to home and he was helping someone they knew. It wouldn't seem so much like charity, you know?" I raised my eyebrows. "You guys don't happen to know any old couples around here, do you?" Mr. Henson smiled, and he didn't say anything. I walked down the steps and turned around. "Well, if you think of anyone, you can always call my mom. I mean, it's not like the deal with Robert is a secret anymore. So if you think of anybody who might like to have him live with them, you can call him right up on the phone. Like you could even call tonight if the idea came to you." I paused for a second. "Just remember one thing, though. If you talk to them, and if you talk to my father, please do not mention the part about him getting fired from his job, okay? He's still pretty sensitive about that subject." Mr. Henson stood up too. "Don't worry, young fellow," he said. "Mrs. Henson and I would never say anything to embarrass your parents." "Great," I said. "Thanks, Mr. and Mrs. Henson. I always knew I could count on you guys." I waved goodbye and headed down the sidewalk. The minute I got home, I ran upstairs and grabbed the other letter from under my mattress. Then I rushed straight to the kitchen and shoved it at my mother. I needed her to read it before the Hensons called. "Hey, Mom, open this, okay? It just came from down the street. Mrs. Henson gave me this letter and asked me to give it to you to read." My mother opened it up. As soon as she finished, she put her hand on her head. "Oh, my word, those poor, poor people." "What?" I said. "What does it say, Mom? Read it to me." Mom picked it up again. "Dear Mr. and Mrs. Winkle, your wonderful son told us that he talked to you about our recent family problems. Please don't worry about us. As soon as we find a nice young man to stay with us for a while, we'll be fine. I only hope that my tired old back will hold out a little longer so I can keep dragging Mr. Henson around his garden. Sincerely, Mrs. Henson. P.S. Say hello to that cute little Robert for us. Mr. Henson and I get such a kick out of that boy." My mother put the letter on the table. "Your father and I definitely need to talk about this when he gets home," she said. "There has to be something we can do to help." She looked at me. "I know you want that too, don't you, Oscar?" "Yes, I do, Mom. I really do. We should help them." Late that afternoon, when my father got home from the bank, I heard them discussing it in their bedroom. The door was closed and they were mumbling, but I could tell that they were taking the situation very seriously. What a relief to finally have all the steps of the plan over with. It made me nervous not knowing what would happen next, but whatever it was, I hoped it would happen soon. I couldn't stand it much longer. That night at dinner, my parents started talking about the Henson right away. It was really good sign, I thought. They both kept looking at Robert and me and telling us how good it makes you feel when you help others. Unfortunately, Robert didn't seem to be listening. Mostly, he was just stuffing his face with spaghetti and sloshing down milk. Dad finally got tired of his bad manners and took away his milk glass. "Robert, have you been listening to anything we've been saying?" he said. "Your mother and I want to know what you and Oscar think we should do to help the Hensons." Robert wiped his mouth with his arm and said, "The Hensons? Why do we need to help the Hensons? What's the problem?" I stared at him in disbelief. For days, I had been talking about all the trouble the Hensons had been having, and my jerky brother didn't listen to a single word. Excuse me. "Man, Robert, where have you been?" I snapped. "Poor Mrs. Henson has a bad back and she needs someone to help her out for a while. Don't you hear anything we talk about around here? You probably don't even know how much the Hensons like you, Robert, do you? They talk about you all the time, in fact. They think that you're just the neatest kid in the whole wide world." Robert made a face. "You're kidding. The Hensons like me? Why do they like me? I don't even know them anymore," he said. He cringed. "Ooh, makes me feel kind of spooky having people like me that I don't even know. What if they're stalkers?" Oh, geez, Robert was ruining everything. If I let him keep talking, my parents would give up on the idea of sending him down there. I had to find a way to shut him up. I was seriously considering dragging him out of the room when all of a sudden the phone rang. I'm not making that up either. It was just like in the movies. The timing was perfect. My heart began to pound like you wouldn't believe. This was a call I had been waiting for. I was sure of it. My father answered the phone. Even though I could hear only his side of the conversation, it was better than I even imagined. "Oh, hello, Mr. Henson. How nice to hear from you. We were just talking about you folks. How are you feeling this evening?" My stomach did a flip-flop. I prayed that my father wouldn't ask anything too personal. "No questions about Mrs. Henson's back. Please, please, please." "What's that, Mr. Henson?" My father said. "Yes, well, thank you very much. He and his brother have always liked you very much, too." Yes, perfect. This was the part where Mr. Henson was telling my father how much he and Mrs. Henson loved Robert. I knew Mr. Henson would find a way to bring up Robert without mentioning anything about Dad being fired. Good old Mr. Henson. He was wording things so carefully, I hardly even worried anymore. My father kept smiling and nodding and just saying, uh-huh, 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 uh-huh. Finally, Dad got ready to hang up. Okay, well, it sounds like a good plan to me, Mr. Henson. We'll finish talking about it here and get back to you, okay? Bye-bye. After he hung up, my father looked at my mother and nodded. Then he looked at Robert and me. Quickly, I stood up. I had to get out of there before my father gave Robert the old heave-ho. If I didn't leave the table, the shocked expression on Robert's face would make me explode with laughter. I ran up to my room as fast as I could. I almost didn't get there soon enough. The laughing started to come out of my mouth as soon as I hit the door. Yee-haw! I did it! I did it! I pulled it off! It's goodbye, Slobbert Robert! Operation Dump the Chump was a success. The chump was officially dumped. Looks like there's 2 more. Okay, I'm going to just read one of these short ones. See you in September. After I settled myself, I went back downstairs to see what had happened. When I walked into the room, Robert was nowhere to be seen. My parents were cleaning the dishes. Mom turned to me and smiled, and my father did the same. Where did Robert go? I asked. I was almost positive he was off crying somewhere. The thought of it brought another grin to my face. He went outside for a little bit. After we told him all the details about the Hensons, I think he needed just to get used to the idea. She came over and sat beside me. You and I need to talk about the Hensons too, Oscar, she said. I shook my head. No, we don't, Mom. Honest, I already know what you're going to say, and I'm okay with it. I swear. The Hensons need our help, and even though it's going to be hard splitting up our family for the summer, I know it's the right thing to do. My mom hugged me. You really are something, Oscar Winkle. Your father and I were so afraid you were going to be upset with the idea, especially now that you're going to be an only child for a while. We thought you'd be bored and lonely without Robert. Bored? Lonely? Without Robert? Was she kidding me? I tried to act casual. So, exactly what did Robert say when you finally told him? I asked. Did he take it okay? Mom nodded. Yep, he took it great, actually. She said, of course, being an only child is going to be a whole new experience for him, too. You know, he's always had you, Oscar, but I'm sure he'll get used to it. Yeah, I'm sure we both will, I said. My curiosity was killing me. Dad, what exactly did Mr. Henson say when he called? My father sat down next to me and said, well, he started off by saying how much he liked you, boys, all these years. He told me that he had always dreamed of having grandsons like you and Robert, and that then he asked if you guys liked to rake and help out in the garden. Good old Mr. Henson, I thought. Good old dependable Mr. Henson. What else? I asked. Let's see. After that, he said he wondered if we would consider having one of you boys come stay with him for a while. He never actually mentioned their medical problems, but I guess he just didn't want to seem too desperate. Mom interrupted. Do you know what I love best about this, Oscar? I love that Mr. Henson was not ashamed to ask for help, she said. He seemed to know that we were the kind of people you could count on. Neighbors helping neighbors. That really makes me feel good. Do you know what I mean? Sure, Mom, I do. I feel exactly the same way. My mother hugged me again. Then, as quietly as anything, she leaned over and whispered something in my ear. My blood turned cold. I swallowed hard and asked her to repeat it. Mom smoothed my hair and said, I said, Oscar, we are really going to miss you this summer. We really and truly are.